I still remember the day I first held her hand. It was a quiet afternoon in our small town, the kind of day when the air feels warmer simply because someone is standing next to you. She wasn't the most glamorous woman anyone had ever seen, but there was something in her smile that disarmed me. It was gentle, unpretentious, and carried a warmth that reached beyond her lips and eyes. She wasn't loud, she wasn't extravagant. She was simply kind. At the time, kindness felt like enough. In fact, I told myself that was all I would ever need. I didn't notice, or perhaps I ignored, the tiny voice in my head that measured her against others, that compared what she had with what she didn't. That voice grew louder over the years, and in the end, it ruined everything. Our marriage began modestly. We didn't have much, just a small apartment, mismatched furniture, and two hearts willing to learn how to share a life. In those early months, it felt like love was everywhere. She would leave me notes in the kitchen, scribble reminders that I was the reason she smiled. Sometimes she'd wait up late just to have dinner with me after long shifts, her hair tied messily, her eyes tired, but her warmth unchanged. She'd hold my hand under the table in the small restaurant near our street corner, squeezing it gently when she laughed at my jokes. There was a purity in the way she loved me, steady, patient, unconditional. And yet, even as she poured her soul into me, my eyes began to wander. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't violent, just subtle moments, like sparks that I tried to pretend weren't there. At gatherings, my gaze would linger on women who seemed bolder, women whose presence filled the room with confidence, women who dressed in ways that demanded attention. My wife wasn't like that. She didn't crave the spotlight. She didn't need to be seen. And slowly, insidiously, I began to confuse humility with inadequacy. I hate to admit it, but I started to fixate on things that should have never mattered. I told myself it was natural, that men notice these things, that attraction is part of life. I looked at her body not with gratitude, but with judgment. I told myself I wanted more, that I deserved more. Her chest was small, and instead of cherishing the softness of her embrace, I resented it. It sounds cruel, and perhaps it was, but my heart grew restless. The world whispered promises of something better, something grander, and I listened. The cracks began to show in our conversations. She would talk about her day, about the students she tutored, about the small victories she celebrated, and I would drift away, barely listening, my mind filled with images of women I had no right to imagine. I grew colder, shorter with my words. I stopped noticing her efforts, how she tried to cook meals I liked, how she stayed up late to mend the small tear in my jacket, how she smiled at me even when I didn't deserve it. Love, they say, dies not from a single blow but from neglect, and I was the one neglecting. Then came the day I met her, the woman who would change everything. She wasn't shy or quiet like my wife. She carried herself with a kind of confidence that turned heads without trying. Her laughter was bold, her steps deliberate, her eyes sharp. And yes, her body was exactly what I thought I wanted. Full curves, an hourglass silhouette, the kind of figure that made me feel intoxicated with desire. I was captivated from the first conversation. She knew the effect she had on me, and she leaned into it. She teased. She complimented. She touched my arm lightly in ways that ignited fires I thought had been extinguished. Suddenly, I was comparing every detail, every gesture, every word, and my wife seemed small, almost invisible in comparison. I tried to resist. I told myself it was just attraction, that I was married, that vows meant something. But temptation has a way of eroding walls, and mine weren't strong to begin with. I started spending more time away from home, inventing excuses to linger where she was, just to feel the rush of her attention. My wife noticed. Of course she did. She asked me gently if something was wrong, if she was failing me in some way. I lied. I told her work was stressful, that I was tired. She believed me, or perhaps she wanted to believe me. Her love was still blind to the storm I was creating. The affair wasn't physical at first. It was emotional. Long conversations, lingering looks, moments stolen between obligations. But it grew. It always grows. What begins as curiosity becomes hunger, and hunger becomes need. Soon I was consumed. I couldn't stop thinking about her. imagining a life where passion was constant and beauty was abundant. I convinced myself I was missing out, that I had made a mistake marrying someone so simple, so ordinary. Desire rewrote my memories. I began to forget the warmth of my wife's smile and remember only what she lacked. The breaking point came one night after an argument. My wife had cooked dinner, but I wasn't hungry. I snapped at her, said things I didn't mean, words sharp enough to wound. She sat quietly, tears welling in her eyes, and I looked at her as though she were a stranger. I couldn't see her love anymore. All I saw was absence, of beauty, of confidence, of the physical features I had convinced myself mattered most. And in that moment, I made the cruelest decision of my life. I told her I wasn't happy. I told her I needed more. I told her it was over. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just sat there, silent, her tears slipping down her cheeks. And then she whispered something I'll never forget. I gave you all of me and it wasn't enough. That sentence pierced me in a way no argument ever could. But instead of listening, instead of seeing the truth, I hardened my heart. I packed my bags and I left. I left behind a woman who had loved me without conditions, who had built a life with me brick by brick, who would have forgiven me if I had asked. I left because I wanted more. Or at least, I thought I did. The wedding with the other woman was dazzling. She wanted everything grand. Flowers spilling across the aisle, music echoing to the hall, champagne glasses clinking as friends toasted our perfect love. And I played the role of the groom, smiling for photographs, pretending I had found the happiness I had been missing. For a while it worked. The attention, the admiration, the rush of being with someone who turned heads. It all fed my ego. I told myself I had made the right decision. I convinced myself that love should feel like this, intense, passionate, overwhelming. But even in those early days, when everything should have been perfect, I felt something missing. In the quiet moments, when the music faded and the guests went home, I felt an emptiness I couldn't name. I brushed it off, told myself it was just adjustment, that love takes time. I buried the doubt under layers of desire and distraction. At first, being with her felt like stepping into another world. She was exciting, unpredictable, alive in ways I convinced myself my wife never was. She wanted dinners at expensive restaurants, weekends away in places I had only seen in magazines, and she expected me to say yes every time. And I did. I gave in because I wanted her approval, because I was desperate to believe I had made the right choice. Every laugh she gave me was like a prize I had to win, every smile like a rare treasure. I told myself that this was what love was supposed to look like, demanding, consuming, all eyes and fire. She knew how to flatter me. She told me I looked handsome, successful, that I deserved someone who matched my ambition. Her words fed the part of me that was always hungry for validation. With her, I felt powerful, admired, envied. When we walked into a room, I saw people glance our way. I noticed the men noticing her, and in a strange way, it made me feel victorious, as though I had claimed a prize. I held her hand tighter in those moments, as if to remind the world that she was mine. But beneath the glitter, there were shadows I chose to ignore. She was not patient like my wife. She didn't listen when I spoke of small things. She dismissed my worries with a wave of her hand, as if problems were beneath her. She demanded attention constantly, and if I hesitated, she accused me of being ungrateful. And yet, I accepted it all, blinded by her beauty, deaf to the warning bells ringing in the distance. The contrast with my past life was impossible to ignore. With my wife, home had always been warm, filled with laughter and small acts of care. She would wake early to prepare breakfast, leaving notes in my bag, wishing me a good day. She would hum softly while cleaning, filling the silence with melodies only I got to hear. But in my new home, silence meant tension. Mornings began with complaints. Nights ended with demands. The house was beautiful, larger than what I had shared before, but it felt cold. Every corner echoed with a kind of emptiness that decorations could not disguise. Still, I told myself this was worth it. I repeated the lie until I believed it. I reminded myself of her curves, her confidence, the way her presence intoxicated me. Whenever doubts crept in, I silenced them with memories of what I thought I had lacked. I painted over my guilt with fantasies of a perfect life. Friends and family reacted differently. Some congratulated me, envying my new life. Others looked at me with quiet disapproval, though they said little. My parents remained polite, but distant. They had loved my first wife. They had seen how she cared for me, how she tried to become part of the family. When they met my new wife, they smiled, but their eyes told another story. I ignored it. I told myself they were old-fashioned, that they couldn't understand my needs. Deep down, I knew they saw what I was refusing to see. Nights were the hardest. After the excitement of the day faded, after the compliments and attention dimmed, I often found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering why I didn't feel whole. My new wife slept beside me, her breathing steady, but I felt like a stranger in my own bed. I remembered how my first wife used to curl against me, how she would mumble in her sleep, reaching for my hand, even unconsciously. I missed that without admitting it. Instead, I told myself I was simply adjusting to change. There was one evening, not long after the wedding, that remains etched in my memory. We had returned from a party, laughter still ringing in my ears, compliments still fresh on my skin. As she slipped into bed, she looked at me and asked why I was quiet. I hesitated. The truth was tangled in my chest, but I couldn't speak it. Instead, I smiled and said I was tired. She didn't press. She turned away, her back to me, and within minutes she was asleep. I lay awake, haunted by the words my first wife had whispered on the night I left. I gave you all of me, and it wasn't enough. Those words replayed like a broken record. No matter how much I tried to silence them, they returned, reminding me of the love I had discarded. She hadn't been perfect, but she had been real. She hadn't dazzled me with glamour, but she had steadied me with devotion, and I had thrown it away for something shiny, something fleeting. The early days of marriage with my new wife were filled with performances. We laughed loudly in public. We posed for photos. We played the role of the perfect couple. Social media became our stage. Every picture carefully chosen to show the world how happy we were. And people believed it. They commented on how beautiful she was, how lucky I must be. Each comment was a bandage covering the wound I refused to treat. But behind closed doors, reality seeped through. The arguments grew sharper. She didn't understand why I wanted quiet evenings at home. She accused me of being boring, of not appreciating her. I reminded her of all the things I did for her, the money I spent, the time I gave. She laughed and said it was the least she deserved. I swallowed my pride and let her words cut me, because I was too proud to admit my mistake. I often wondered if my first wife was happier without me. I imagined her finding someone who cherished her, who saw the beauty I had been blind to. The thought stung, not because I wanted her back, but because I realized she deserved so much better than the man I had been. Regret began to creep in, but I pushed it down. I wasn't ready to face the truth. Not yet. The more I tried to convince myself I was happy, the more the emptiness grew. I found myself searching for pieces of the past in the present. When my new wife laughed, I wished it were softer, like the way my first wife used to laugh at my bad jokes. When she touched my arm, I wished it were gentler, less calculated. I missed the little things, the handwritten notes, the quiet dinners, the way she remembered my favorite tea. My new wife never thought of those details. She lived for the grand gestures, the attention, the show, and I, foolishly, had mistaken show for substance. The irony is cruel. I had left because I thought I didn't have enough, and yet now, surrounded by everything I thought I wanted, I felt poorer than ever.